Let's now discuss the changes in the ELPAC process and how it impacts CALPADS reporting. The ELPAC, or English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, is a required state test to measure English language proficiency, or ELP, for all English learners in kindergarten through grade 12. There are two different ELPAC assessments, the initial ELPAC and the summative ELPAC. And starting this year, the initial ELPAC will now transition to a computer-based system. Let's now look at the two different assessments. The initial ELPAC is used to identify students as being either an EL or IFEP. Its purpose is to determine the English proficiency of students entering California schools for the first time, so that ELs can get the extra help they need to do well in school while receiving instruction in all school subjects. And participation in the initial ELPAC is determined by a parent's response to the state's home language survey form. The summative ELPAC is the ELP assessment used by California to meet federal accountability requirements related to EL students' progress and proficiency in learning English. At the state and local levels, ELPAC scores are used to determine the English Language Progress Indicators, or ELPIs, for the California School Dashboard. And at the individual student level, ELPAC scores are a major factor in decisions whether a student should continue to be identified as an EL and receive the associated services. The ELPAC has 4 assessment domains or performance areas used to score proficiency and are further classified into composites. The listening and speaking domains are categorized under oral language composite, while the reading and writing are classified under written language composite. The ELPAC measures the English language proficiency as defined in the skills from the 4 domains mentioned. It is also used to monitor students' ELP progress throughout their academic year. Starting August 20, 2020, the initial ELPAC testing will also be computer-based following the summative testing process change in 2019-2020. LEAs who decided to use the paper-pencil initial ELPAC between July 1 to August 19 of 2020 must submit a list of SSIDs for each student tested to the Educational Testing Service, or ETS, prior to the opening of the online initial ELPAC on August 20. Any scores must be stored locally first and then entered into the DEI once the initial ELPAC functionality is activated. For students tested on August 20 onwards, they must take the computer-based initial ELPAC process. The reading and listening answers are scored by the test delivery system, while the speaking scores are entered into the DEI. Students grades 3 to 12 will type their writing responses into the TDS, and the scores for the writing will be entered in the THSS. Students K to 2 will still take the paper-pencil test, and their scores are entered into the DEI. Any resulting EL and IFEP status from the test will be sent directly from TOMS to CALPADS in a nightly feed and visible to LEAs in CALPADS within 48 hours. The changes in the initial ELPAC testing process have also impacted the SELA reporting in CALPADS. In prior years, the ELPAC testing was a mix of paper-pencil and computer-based examination. LEAs submit all ELA statuses to CALPADS using either the batch file template or online maintenance. However, starting in academic year 2020-2021, as a result of the initial ELPAC testing being computer-based, the resulting initial ELA score of EL or IFEP will be sent directly from TOMS to CALPADS in a nightly feed and visible to LEAs in CALPADS within 48 hours. LEAs can only include TBD, EO, RFEP, and ADEL in batch file uploads. However, LEAs can still report any status manually in online maintenance, and that includes EL and IFEP, but may need correction codes based on the SELA progression. Also, students aged 22 and older with a primary language not equal to English or sign language should be reported with an ADEL ELA status code. They should not be reported with a TBD, but instead reported with an ADEL. Any student aged 22 and older who has prior EL status must also be reported with an ADEL status. To ensure that a student is recognized in TOMS for ELPAC, relevant data must be posted by the LEA in CALPADS. For initial ELPAC testing, CALPADS will send the following data to TOMS for a student to appear on the initial ELPAC student eligibility report and be allowed to either test or receive test scores. First is the SCNR record, which reflects an active primary or short-term enrollment record to gain ownership of the SSID. If a student is being tested prior to the expected school start date, LEAs can report that date in the future as long as it does not cause a concurrent enrollment. Next is the SELA record with an ELAS code of TBD, an ELAS start date greater than or equal to July 1 of the current academic year, and a primary language not equal to English or sign language. And lastly is the SINF record, which contains the relevant demographic information and address of the student. For summative testing that happens during the spring, the same data elements are expected to be submitted to CALPADS. The only difference is that the current SELA record must reflect an ELAS code of EL.